Aliens killed this human's dog, not knowing he was a super soldier. The settlement on the edge of human space was so quiet that most maps forgot to name it. It sat between a pale blue sky and endless red sand, a place where the wind carried more dust than sound. The buildings were simple metal shells, shaped to survive storms and little else. To most of the galaxy, this place was nothing. To Elias Ward, it was home. Every morning, Elias walked the same path from his small living unit to the outer fence. He carried a mug of warm tea in one hand and a small device in the other, checking power lines and signal towers. His dog, Nova, walked beside him, tail high, ears alert, as if she believed the entire world depended on her watchful eyes. Nova was not a large dog, but she moved with confidence. Her fur was white with dark spots, and her eyes were bright and curious. She loved chasing the small, wind-blown scraps of cloth that sometimes flew across the sand like living things. Elias often smiled at her energy, even on days when his own felt low. He had not always lived in a place like this. Long ago, Elias had been someone else. His body still remembered things his mind tried to forget. The way his muscles reacted to sudden noise. The way his eyes always searched for exits in every room. The way his hands sometimes moved in patterns that belonged to old training, not daily life. But here, on this quiet world, he tried to be just a man with a job and a dog. The settlement had about 40 people. Farmers, technicians, traders, and families who wanted distance from the crowded core worlds. They helped each other, shared meals, and told the same old stories around small fire pits at night. Elias did not talk much about his past, and no one pushed him. They knew him as the one who fixed broken machines faster than anyone else, and the one whose dog always greeted visitors first. That morning, the sky looked strange. Elias noticed it while Nova chased a piece of cloth near the fence. A shadow passed over the ground, slow and wide. He looked up and felt his chest tighten. A ship. It was not human. The shape was sharp and curved at the same time, like a blade made of dark glass. Soft lights glowed along its sides, colors Elias had never seen used in human designs. It moved without sound, floating down toward the settlement as if the air itself welcomed it. People began to step out of their homes. Some pointed, some whispered. A few children waved, thinking it might be a friendly visitor. Elias did not wave. His body had already shifted. His feet moved slightly apart. His hand lowered the tea mug to the ground without him thinking about it. Nova stopped chasing and stood beside him, head low, watching the sky. The ship landed near the center of the settlement, sending a small wave of sand outward. A ramp lowered, smooth and slow. 3 figures walked out. They were tall and thin, their bodies covered in dark armor that reflected the light. Their faces were hidden behind smooth helmets with glowing lines where eyes might be. They carried devices in their hands that hummed softly. The settlement leader, a woman named Mara, stepped forward. She raised her hands in a peaceful sign. "Welcome," she said, speaking in basic trade language. "This is a human settlement. We come in peace." The aliens paused. One of them tilted its head, as if listening to something only it could hear. Elias watched from a distance. Nova growled softly, a low sound deep in her chest. He placed a hand on her back, feeling the warmth of her fur. The aliens walked forward. Their steps were slow, careful, but not afraid. One of them raised a device and pointed it at a nearby building. A beam of light scanned the wall, moving from top to bottom. Myra frowned. "You need permission to scan private property," she said. The alien did not respond. It turned and spoke to the others in a language that sounded like clicking metal and flowing water. Elias felt something old and cold move in his chest. Nova barked. It was not loud, but it was sharp. The sound cut through the quiet air. The aliens turned their heads at the same time. One of them raised its arm. The device in its hand flashed. Elias moved. He did not run. He stepped forward fast, his voice clear. "She's just a dog," he said. "She won't hurt you." The alien hesitated. The light dimmed. But the second alien did not. Another flash of light, brighter this time, cut across the space between them. Nova fell. The world seemed to stop. Elias reached her in 2 steps, dropping to his knees in the sand. Nova lay still, her eyes open but no longer focused. The air felt too quiet, too empty. "Nova," he whispered. He touched her side. There was no movement, no breath. The settlement went silent. Children were pulled back into homes. Myra stood frozen, her hands still raised. The aliens watched, their helmets reflecting Elias and the dog in small, curved shapes. Something inside Elias broke, but it did not explode. It did not burn. It went cold. He slowly stood up. His face showed no anger, no tears, no fear. The aliens turned away as if the moment was already over. One of them made a short gesture with its hand, and they began walking back toward their ship. Elias looked down at Nova one last time. "I'll be back," he said softly. He walked to his home. Inside, everything looked simple. A small table, a chair, a shelf with tools and old books. On the far wall, behind a thin metal panel, was something no one else in the settlement knew about. Elias placed his hand against the wall. The panel slid open. Behind it was a small, dark box. No lights, no markings. It looked like nothing. He touched the top of the box and it came alive. A soft blue glow spread across its surface. The air in the room felt different, heavy and charged. Elias closed his eyes. In his mind, he felt a door open. Memories rushed in. Training halls made of steel and light. Voices calling commands, pain, strength, loss, and purpose. A name he had not used in years, Sentinel. He opened his eyes and spoke. "Activate." The box sent out a pulse, silent but powerful. It did not travel through air. It moved through space itself, slipping past stars and stations, through old networks and forgotten systems. Far away, on human worlds that had not seen war in generations, screens lit up. Old machines woke. People who had once worn uniforms felt a familiar weight settle on their shoulders. One message appeared everywhere, simple and clear. "Sentinel active. Cause civilian loss." Back in the settlement, the alien ship began to rise into the sky. Elias stepped outside. He stood alone in the sand, watching it lift away. The sky returned to its pale blue. The wind picked up again, moving cloth and dust across the ground. Myra approached him slowly. "I'm so sorry," she said. Elias nodded once. "They didn't know," he replied. "But now they will." That night the stars looked brighter. Elias sat outside his home, staring up at them. He did not hold a weapon. He did not wear armor. He looked like any other man on a quiet world, but the galaxy had started to move. In distant systems, human ships changed course. Not in a rush, not in anger, but with calm and purpose. Messages passed between places that had not spoken in years. Agreements were remembered. Old promises were brought back into the light. The aliens who had visited the settlement did not notice any of this. Not yet. Elias stood and walked back to where Nova had fallen. He knelt and placed a small marker in the sand, a simple piece of metal with her name carved into it. "You kept watch," he said softly. "Now I will." The wind carried his words away, out across the red sand and into the open sky. The alien ship was already far away when Elias returned to his home, but he could still feel its presence in his thoughts, like a shadow that refused to fade. The night air was cool, and the wind carried the soft sound of metal walls shifting as the settlement prepared for sleep. Most people stayed inside. No one knew what would come next, and fear moved quietly between the buildings like a living thing. Elias sat on the edge of his small bed and stared at the blue glow of the box behind the wall panel. The light was steady now, calm, as if nothing important had happened. But he knew better. The signal was already traveling across human space, touching places that had been silent for years. Far beyond the red sand and pale sky, a small station drifted near a yellow star. It was old, built during the early days of human expansion. Most people thought it had been shut down long ago. Inside, a single screen came to life. A woman stood in front of it. Her hair was gray and her back was slightly bent with age, but her eyes were sharp. She wore simple clothes, not a uniform. When the message appeared, she closed her eyes for a moment. "Sentinel active," she whispered. "So it begins again." She walked to a locked cabinet and opened it with a code she had not used in decades. Inside was a small badge worn at the edges. She picked it up and held it in her hand. On a distant ocean world, a man fishing from a wooden dock felt a sudden vibration in the small device on his wrist. He frowned and tapped it. The same message appeared. He looked out at the calm water and then at the horizon where clouds were gathering. He sighed. "I told myself I was done," he said to the empty air. "But I guess the galaxy has other plans." Human space did not move like a wave. It moved like a mind waking up, slow at first, then faster as more parts became aware. Elias lay back on his bed, staring at the ceiling. His body felt tired, but his mind was wide awake. Memories tried to pull him back into the past, but he held them away. Tonight was not about what he had been, it was about what had been taken from him. Outside, a small group of settlers stood near Nova's marker. They spoke in low voices. Some cried, some stood in silence. The simple piece of metal in the sand seemed too small to hold so much meaning. Mara walked back to her home, her face pale. She kept looking up at the sky as if expecting another ship to appear. The next morning, the settlement woke to a strange sound. It was not loud, but it was deep, like a distant hum that seemed to come from everywhere at once. People stepped outside, looking around in confusion. Elias was already awake. He stood near the fence, watching the horizon. A shape appeared in the sky, then another, and another. They were human ships. They did not land. They did not circle. They took positions high above the settlement, forming a wide, invisible shield. Mara ran toward Elias. "Did you call them?" she asked. Elias nodded. "I didn't ask for help," he said. "I reminded them who they are." The ships stayed silent. No messages came from them. No weapons were visible, but their presence changed the air. The settlement no longer felt small or alone. Far away, the alien patrol that had visited the colony was reporting back to its command fleet. Their leader stood in a tall room made of smooth stone and glowing lines. A large image of the human settlement floated in the air between them. "The humans showed no resistance," the patrol leader said. "One civilian caused a small disturbance. It was handled." The alien commander studied the image, and the humans accepted this. "They did not respond," the patrol leader replied. The commander nodded. "Then they are as weak as the reports say." The room lights dimmed slightly as another alien entered. This one carried a small data cube. "There is unusual activity in human space," the newcomer said. "Ships are moving, networks are opening, old channels are active again." The commander's eyes narrowed. "Because of a small settlement?" "Possibly," the newcomer said. The commander waved a hand. "Humans always make noise, it means nothing." Back on the red sand world, Elias walked through the settlement. People watched him differently now, some with gratitude, some with fear, some with questions they did not dare to ask. A young boy stepped forward, holding a small piece of cloth in his hands. It was one of the scraps Nova used to chase. "Is she really gone?" the boy asked. Elias knelt down to the boy's level. "Yes," he said softly. The boy looked at the cloth and then at Elias. "She was brave," he said. Elias smiled for the first time since the day before. "She was," he agreed. That afternoon, a message finally came from one of the ships above. It did not appear on screens. It played in Elias' mind, clear and steady. "Sentinel," the voice said. "This is command. We received your signal." Elias closed his eyes. "I didn't think anyone would still be listening." "We never stopped," the voice replied. "We just hoped we would never hear it again." "What happens now?" Elias asked. "Now," the voice said, "the galaxy learns that humans still keep their promises." Elias looked up at the sky. The ships were small points of light, almost like stars. He thought of Nova, standing beside him, watching the horizon with endless trust. The alien fleet began to move. They gathered near a large space station that controlled trade routes in the region. Their ships were many, their designs sharp and powerful. They believed they were showing strength. What they did not see were the human ships already waiting, far away, hidden in the dark between stars. There was no attack. There was no battle. Human ships simply appeared on every major path the aliens used. They did not block them. They did not threaten them. They just waited. Trade ships turned back. Messages went unanswered. Allies began to ask questions. The alien commander watched reports pile up on his screen. "What are the humans doing?" he demanded. "They are not moving," an officer said. "They are just there." "Send them a warning," the commander said. A message was sent to the nearest human ship. The reply came almost instantly. "We are observing." The simple words made the commander uneasy. On the red sand world, Elias sat with Mara outside her home. They shared a simple meal, but neither of them ate much. "Are we in danger?" Mara asked. Elias thought for a moment. "Not here," he said. "Not anymore." "Because of them?" She nodded toward the sky. "Because of what they represent," Elias said. Mara looked at him. "And what do you represent?" Elias stared at the stars. "A reminder," he said, "that even quiet people have lines they won't let the galaxy cross." That night, a small alien ship approached the settlement. It did not land. It stayed high in the air, far from the human ships above. A message came through the settlement's communication system, translated into clear basic trade language. "We request dialogue," the voice said. "We did not intend offense." Mara looked at Elias. He stood slowly. "I'll talk," he said. The image of an alien appeared in front of him, its helmet removed. Its face was smooth and pale, its eyes large and dark. "We did not understand the value of the animal," the alien said. "In our culture, such creatures are tools, not companions." Elias nodded. "In ours," he said, "they are family." The alien was silent for a moment. "The response from your people is unexpected." Elias met its eyes. "We didn't respond," he said. "We remembered." The alien tilted its head. "What do you want?" Elias looked down at the sand at the place where Nova's marker stood. Then he looked back at the alien. "I want a galaxy," he said, "where no one decides what life is worth." The image faded. The alien ship pulled back, disappearing into the dark. Elias stayed where he was, listening to the wind, watching the stars. The galaxy was changing, not with noise or fire, but with attention, with memory, with quiet, steady presence. The stars above the red sand world looked the same as they always had. But Elias knew the galaxy behind them was shifting in ways most people could not yet see. The human ship still waited high in the sky, silent and calm like watchers who never blinked. Life in the settlement tried to return to normal, but nothing felt simple anymore. Children went back to their lessons. Farmers checked their crops. Traders cleaned their small stores. Yet every sound from the sky made people pause. Every strange light in the distance pulled their eyes upward. Elias walked through the settlement each morning, not to check machines or fences, but to listen. He listened to the worries people shared in low voices. He listened to the way hope and fear mixed together in the air. Some settlers thanked him, others avoided him. A few looked at him with a kind of awe that made him uncomfortable. He did not want to be a symbol. He only wanted Nova back. Far away, on a bright world covered in tall white towers, the alien council gathered in a wide circular chamber. Light flowed across the walls like slow water. Representatives from many species stood or floated in their places, their forms as different as the stars themselves. At the center, the commander who had dismissed the humans spoke with a tight voice. "The humans have disrupted trade routes across 3 sectors," he said. "They have not attacked, they have not threatened, but their presence alone has caused instability." A tall alien with skin like polished stone stepped forward. "Have they broken any laws?" it asked. The commander hesitated. "No, they are within neutral space." Another council member, small and winged, fluttered closer. "Then perhaps the problem is not their actions," it said, "but what they remind us of." The room grew quiet. A screen lit up in the center, showing images of human ships positioned near key systems. They were not blocking. They were not chasing. They were simply there, like quiet guardians. "This started with a single human settlement," the winged alien continued, "and a single act of enforcement." The commander looked away. Back on the red sand world, Elias stood near Nova's marker. He had added a small circle of smooth stones around it, each one chosen carefully from the sand. He did not know why he did it, it just felt right. A soft sound came from behind him. Myra approached, carrying a small device in her hands. "We received a broadcast," she said. "It's public galactic news," Elias nodded. "What are they saying?" Mara activated the device. A human reporter appeared, her face serious. "Across the galaxy, attention has turned to the sudden movement of human fleets," the reporter said. "Human officials state that this is not a show of force, but a return to long-standing agreements about civilian safety and neutral space. Some alien leaders have expressed concern, while others have called for open talks." The image shifted to show different worlds, different species, all watching the same quiet standoff. Elias turned off the device. "They're starting to talk," he said. Myra studied him. "Is that what you wanted?" Elias thought for a moment. "I wanted them to listen," he replied. "Talking comes after that." In human space, a large meeting took place on a station that floated between 2 suns. Representatives from many human worlds gathered in a wide hall made of glass and light. An old man stood at the center. He had once been a commander in the Sentinel program, back when it was more than just a name. "The signal came from one of our own," he said. "A man who chose to live quietly instead of standing here with us. That should tell you something." A woman in a formal uniform crossed her arms. "He activated systems we buried for a reason," she said. "The galaxy could see this as a threat." The old man nodded. "Or they could see it as a promise," he replied. "We said we would protect civilians, not just our own. We said power would not decide who matters." He looked around the room. This is not about one man or one dog. This is about whether our words still mean anything. Silence filled the hall. On a distant trade world, a group of alien merchants sat in a crowded market. Their usual human partners had not arrived. Goods piled up with no one to buy them. Voices rose in frustration. "Why are the humans doing this?" one merchant demanded. Another shook its head. "They say it's about safety, about laws we forgot." A third leaned in. "Maybe it's about reminding us that we forgot them." The idea spread faster than any message. Back in the settlement, a small alien shuttle landed near the fence. It did not come close. It stayed at a respectful distance. Two figures stepped out, unarmed, their hands visible. Elias walked forward to meet them. One of the aliens spoke first. "We are observers from the council," it said. "We wish to understand." Elias nodded. "Then ask." The alien looked around at the simple buildings, the people watching from doorways, the marker in the sand. "Why does this place matter?" it asked. Elias followed its gaze to Nova's marker. "Because it's small," he said, "because no one thought it was important." The second alien tilted its head. "And you?" Elias smiled faintly. "I thought I wasn't important either." They talked for a long time, about laws, about customs, about how different species valued life in different ways. Elias did not argue, he did not accuse, he just explained. By the time the sun began to set, the aliens seemed tired but thoughtful. "We will report what we have learned," one said. "Good," Elias replied. "Learning is a start." As the shuttle lifted away, a young girl from the settlement approached Elias. She held a small carved figure in her hands. It looked like a dog. "I made it for her," the girl said, placing it near the marker. Elias knelt beside her. "Thank you," he said. That night, the human ships above sent out a new kind of message. It was not a command. It was not a warning. It was a record. Across the galaxy, screens lit up with images of human history, of early explorers helping stranded alien ships, of treaties signed in dust and rain, of humans standing between powerful empires and small, frightened worlds. The message ended with simple words. "We did not come to rule, we came to remember." The alien council watched in silence. The commander who had dismissed the humans felt something heavy settle in his chest. He remembered stories from his own people's past, about times when they had been small and ignored. In the settlement, Elias watched the same message on a small screen. He did not feel proud. He felt tired, but in a way that was lighter than before. Mara sat beside him. "Do you think it will work?" she asked. Elias looked at the stars. "Change never works all at once," he said. "It works one thought at a time." In a distant system, a young alien officer stood on a ship bridge, staring at a human vessel nearby. It was close enough to see details on its hull, marks of age, repairs done long ago. "These ships aren't new," the officer said to their captain. The captain nodded. "No, they've been waiting." The idea sent a quiet shiver through the bridge. Back on the red sand world, the wind moved gently through the settlement. People gathered around small fires, sharing food and stories. The fear that had once filled the air was softer now, mixed with something else. Curiosity. Hope. Elias stood at the edge of the fence, looking out at the open land. He could almost imagine Nova running ahead of him, chasing shadows and scraps of cloth. "I'm still here," he said softly, to the stars, to the wind, to the memory of a small, brave dog. Far away, more worlds began to talk. More leaders began to question old rules. More voices asked what safety and respect really meant. The galaxy was not changing because of a fleet or a program or a super soldier. It was changing because someone, somewhere, had decided that even the smallest life mattered. The galaxy was beginning to stir in ways no one had predicted. It moved slowly at first, like the tide, and then faster as the currents of old agreements, forgotten laws, and shared memories began to pull together. Far from the red sand world, human ships that had been silent for years now glided through the blackness of space, their lights faint but steady. Their presence alone reminded the galaxy that humans were neither weak nor reckless. They were deliberate, patient, and precise. Elias stood at the edge of the settlement, where the sand stretched toward the horizon. He had walked past Nova's marker that morning and adjusted the small stones he had placed around it. The circle was perfect now, neat and ordered, as though it contained her spirit, her presence in every grain of sand. He did not speak, but he felt her energy, quiet and strong like the pulse of the galaxy itself. Mara approached, carrying a small tray of food. She had watched the human fleets arrive in the sky above the settlement, and then disappear into orbit around nearby systems. Their movements were subtle, almost hidden, but the effect was unmistakable. The alien trade routes had changed. Aliens who had relied on the humans to remain passive now faced confusion, hesitation, and questions they could not answer. "They're everywhere," Mara said quietly, "and no one knows what to do." Elias did not answer at first. He walked slowly to the edge of the settlement fence and looked out at the empty horizon. "They're not everywhere," he said finally. "They're where they need to be, that is enough." In human space, a large council of former commanders and scientists had convened on a station orbiting a luminous orange star. They were old, some of them decades removed from active duty, but the spark in their eyes told anyone who watched that experience had taught them how to see the patterns of the galaxy. The Sentinel program, once secret, was now partially active. Ships, machines, and networks long dormant had been awakened by Elias' signal. "Do you realize what this means?" one of the old commanders asked. "We are no longer just observers, we are participants again." A woman sitting nearby, her uniform crisp, shook her head. "Participation sounds peaceful," she said, "but the aliens will see it as a threat. They will respond." The old commander smiled faintly. "They will respond," he admitted, "but not in the way they think. Humanity's strength is not in the weapons we use. It is in the choices we make." Across multiple systems, the first evidence of these choices began to appear. Trade shipments that had been delayed for years were rerouted to safe zones. Disputes between minor colonies were mediated not by force, but by the appearance of a human presence, careful and impartial. In every case, the humans acted with restraint and clarity, never forcing action, simply reminding others that they were being watched and protected. On a distant ocean world, alien diplomats received a report about human activity in neutral space. "They are not aggressive," one said. "They are not attacking, yet they are everywhere, and still everything changes." Back on the red sand world, Elias had begun meeting with representatives from other species. Small alien observers, curious and cautious, had landed near the settlement to speak with him directly. They asked questions about laws, customs, and the value of life. Elias answered each one patiently, speaking in basic language that all could understand. "Why does your species care about one dog?" an alien asked, its eyes wide and reflective. Elias crouched down and looked at the sand, imagining Nova running through it one more time. "Because life matters," he said simply. "Not just for humans, not just for your species, but for everyone. If even the smallest life can be dismissed, the galaxy becomes a place where fear controls all decisions." The alien was silent for a long moment. Then it nodded slowly. "I see. Perhaps we have much to learn." That evening, the settlement gathered near the edge of the dunes. Humans and aliens, curious, cautious, and respectful, listened to the quiet wind and the soft sound of distant waves of sand. Elias did not speak, but people felt his presence, the calm and certainty he carried. He had not raised a weapon. He had not given orders. He had simply reminded the galaxy of a truth too long forgotten. From orbit, the human ships continued their watch. They moved with precision, sometimes slipping silently into view near key trade routes, sometimes hovering out of reach, letting the mere possibility of their presence influence decisions. No one needed to fire a shot. Presence alone was enough. News of this careful activity began to spread quickly. Hollow screens and communication networks across distant systems broadcast images of human settlements, trade convoys, and fleets operating with a patience that seemed impossible to those who had relied on aggression and intimidation. Analysts of the alien coalition began to record these events in private logs, unsure whether to see them as threats or miracles. Elias spent much of his day walking among the settlement. He watched children play, aliens interact quietly with humans, and settlers go about their daily tasks. He saw Mara teaching a group of young children how to use basic tools, her laughter carrying across the dunes. He saw others experimenting with small projects, creating devices for communication or repair, inspired by the stories of human fleets and networks. And still, the memory of Nova was close. He spoke to her silently as he walked, imagining her beside him as she had always been. "This is for you," he whispered. "We do this because we can, because it matters." In the depths of human space, reports from the Sentinel networks began arriving at central command stations. Each report was a small miracle, a colony saved from exploitation, a trade route stabilized, a conflict resolved without confrontation. Every action had been guided by subtle observation, by timing, by humanity's patience and intelligence. For the aliens watching, confusion grew. How could a species with such apparent weakness hold so much influence? How could humans shape the behavior of fleets, colonies, and entire sectors without the use of weapons or force? The council that had dismissed Elia's actions as meaningless met again. "We are being reminded," said one representative, "that humans have tools beyond our understanding, not weapons, not fleets, but influence." Meanwhile, Elias began preparing a plan for broader communication. Small signals were sent to previously dormant human settlements, inviting them to rejoin the network quietly, without fanfare. Each one responded with careful gratitude. Ships that had been lost or abandoned decades ago were reactivated. Old sentinels, retired and dispersed, felt the call and began traveling toward key points across human space. In the settlement, the evening sky glowed with a soft, pink light as the sun dipped below the dunes. Elias stood atop a small rise, looking at the horizon where the human ships lingered in orbit above the nearby system. He imagined Nova's face, her bright eyes, her energy. He thought about the galaxy beyond the dunes and how fragile it was, and how easily it could be forgotten. Mara approached, bringing a small bundle of supplies. She did not speak immediately. Instead, she simply stood beside him, looking out at the same distant light. "They will listen," she said finally. Elias nodded. "Not because they fear," he replied, "but because they remember. And once the galaxy remembers, it cannot unlearn what it knows." Across space, alien leaders began to convene privately. Some were angry, some were curious, some were afraid. The humans had not attacked. They had not demanded anything. And yet the systems they relied upon were shifting quietly, imperceptibly, like sand underwater. Back in the settlement, Elias returned to Nova's marker once more. He knelt, brushing his hand across the stones. "This is only the beginning," he said softly. "One life can start a change if we honor it." At that moment, a new broadcast arrived across human space. It was from the central command station that had once coordinated the Sentinel program. The message was simple, and it echoed across networks, private and public. "Humanity is awake. We remember. We act to protect. The galaxy is invited to join, not in fear, but in responsibility." For a long time, no one spoke. Then messages began to flow, questions and answers, dialogue that had been absent for decades. Aliens asked how humans had survived the wars, how they had retained knowledge and patience. Humans offered guidance, advice, and assistance. Slowly, a web of understanding began to form across systems. Elias walked through the settlement that night, passing children asleep in their homes, aliens quietly tending small gardens, and settlers reflecting on the day. The wind carried the scent of sand and stone, the memory of warmth and loyalty, and the quiet echo of a small dog who had changed the course of a galaxy by her presence alone. He stopped atop a small dune, looking at the stars. The human fleets above were distant pinpoints of light, each one a guardian in its own way. For the first time in decades, Elias felt a sense of peace. Not because the galaxy was safe. It was not. But because it had begun to learn that life mattered, and that even the smallest act of remembrance could ripple through the universe. And somewhere, beyond the light years of empty space, the aliens who had once believed themselves in control began to see the truth. Humanity's strength was not in what they could destroy, but in what they chose to honor. And that, the galaxy realized slowly, quietly, was more powerful than any weapon. Elias knelt once more beside Nova's marker, brushing the last grains of sand from the stones. "This is for all of us," he whispered, "for those who are watched and those who watch. We will not forget, and we will not fail." The wind moved over the dunes, carrying his words outward, across red sands, quiet settlements, and far beyond, toward the edge of space where the stars waited, patient and bright. The galaxy had begun to learn, and it would never be the same again. The galaxy was waking up. It moved slowly at first, like the tide on a quiet shore, and then faster as the currents of memory, respect, and understanding pulled everything together. Far from the red sand world, human fleets glided through space, silent and precise. They did not attack. They did not demand. They were reminders, moving with purpose that no one could mistake. Elias stood atop a small rise in the settlement, his eyes on the horizon where the sky met the dunes. Nova's marker sat behind him, a circle of stones carefully arranged. Each stone seemed to hold a piece of her spirit, and through her, the memory of humanity's quiet strength spread across the stars. He could feel it in his mind. Distant human settlements awakening, fleets moving into orbit, old networks flickering to life. The galaxy was listening. Mara approached, carrying a small tray of food, though neither of them was hungry. She looked at him, her eyes reflecting the light of the setting sun. "It's happening," she said softly. "They are responding, they are listening." Elias nodded. "Not because they fear," he said, "because they remember, and once the galaxy remembers, it cannot forget." Across space, the alien council convened again. They had been watching human activity quietly, unsure how to respond. Ships appeared near key systems, trade routes shifted without a fight, disputes were resolved through presence rather than force. The humans did not act as aggressors, they acted as guardians. The aliens did not understand at first, and that was their weakness. "We underestimated them," the commander admitted, his voice tight. "We thought humans were weak, that they relied on aggression, yet they influence entire systems without firing a shot. How is this possible?" "They are not trying to dominate," another council member replied. "They are teaching, they are reminding. We see the effect but not the method, and that is more powerful than any fleet." On a distant ocean world, human ships glided silently near colonies. Sensors and networks long dormant flickered to life, guided by the Sentinel program. Each activation was a reminder. Humans kept their promises. Civilians were safe. Agreements mattered. No one could be ignored. Back on the red sand world, Elias walked through the settlement, observing the people around him. Children played near the dunes, aliens interacted quietly with settlers, and adults repaired small machines, inspired by the example of the human fleets. Each day felt like a thread weaving a larger tapestry. A young girl ran up to him, holding a carved figure of a dog. "I made this for her," she said, pointing to Nova's marker. Elias knelt beside her, placing his hand gently on her shoulder. "Thank you," he said softly. "She watches over us still." The night sky turned deep purple, dotted with stars, and the fleets above moved quietly, forming patterns visible only from space. They were not weapons of war, but symbols of vigilance. Every alien, every trader, every colony that observed them began to understand something new. Humans did not act out of fear or desire for control. They acted out of principle. Messages began to flow across human networks. Former sentinels, now retired, received notifications. Ships that had long been abandoned were guided back to orbit. Colonies, once isolated, were reminded that they were not alone. Every message carried the same quiet insistence. Life matters, civilians matter, promises matter. The alien council could no longer ignore the humans. Ships that had once been confident now hesitated. Trade routes were quieted, not because humans had attacked, but because they had reminded everyone what was at stake. The galaxy's balance shifted, subtly and irrevocably. Elias returned to the dunes that evening and sat on a low rise, staring at the horizon. Mara joined him, handing him a simple cup of tea. They did not speak at first, only listening to the wind, the quiet movement of the settlement, the distant hum of human fleets orbiting above nearby systems. Finally, Mara asked, "Do you think the galaxy will ever understand fully?" Elias took a slow breath, eyes fixed on the stars. "They will understand in time," he said. "Humans show patience. We act, but we wait. We do not force, we remind. That is how change lasts." Far from the red sand world, alien observers arrived at settlements where humans had appeared. They were curious, cautious, respectful. They asked questions about customs, laws, and the value of life. Elias spoke to them patiently, explaining that humans measured worth differently, that compassion and vigilance could shape systems more reliably than fear or aggression. "Why does one life matter so much?" one alien asked. Elias thought of Nova, of the quiet strength she had given him every day, of the principles she had taught without words. "Because every life matters," he said. "Not just yours, not just mine, all of them. If even one life can be ignored, the galaxy becomes a place where fear rules. But if we honor even the smallest life, we can shape a better future." The alien was silent, considering the words. Slowly, it nodded. "Perhaps we have much to learn," it said. Across human space, the Sentinel networks continued to activate. Former military personnel, scientists, and engineers returned to service quietly, guided by Elias' signal. They did not seek glory. They did not seek revenge. They sought to uphold principles humanity had promised long ago. safety, respect, and vigilance for all. News broadcasts across distant worlds carried images of human fleets, not as conquerors but as protectors. Trade routes resumed under human oversight, disputes were mediated with fairness, and colonies regained a sense of security. The galaxy watched, and slowly, quietly began to change. In the settlement, Elias often stood at Nova's marker, brushing grains of sand from the stones surrounding it. He whispered to her memory, to the principles she had inspired in him. "This is for all of us," he said. "For those who are watched and those who watch, we honor life. We protect it, we will not forget." Aliens who had once dismissed humans began to convene privately. They debated how a species so apparently small could influence entire systems without firing a single shot. Their confusion turned to reflection. Their reflection turned to respect. Slowly, they began to adopt new ways of thinking, guided not by fear or aggression, but by the example humans had set. The settlement became a hub of quiet diplomacy. Humans and aliens worked together, sharing knowledge, solving disputes, and building small technologies that strengthened understanding rather than weapons. Children of both species learned together, playing games that taught cooperation, strategy, and empathy. One evening, a young boy approached Elias holding a small piece of driftwood shaped like a ship. "Will they always watch over us?" he asked. Elias smiled faintly. "As long as we remember," he said, "and as long as we act, watching is not enough, protecting is action. That is the responsibility we all share." Across the galaxy, human and alien leaders began to speak openly. Former conflicts were re-examined. Treaties long forgotten were honored. Decisions that once relied on power alone were now guided by principle. Humanity's quiet influence spread, reshaping the galaxy without a single battle. Elias walked through the settlement at night, past quiet homes, small gardens, and children asleep under soft lights. He paused at Nova's marker, placing a hand on the circle of stones. "We did it," he whispered. "Not for glory, not for revenge, but because it was right, and that is how we change the world." The wind carried his words across the red sands, outward into space, touching distant worlds, fleets, and settlements. Across the stars, humans and aliens alike felt the reminder. Life matters, promises matter, and even one act of remembrance can ripple through the galaxy. Elias stood, looking at the sky where faint lights marked the human fleets above. He imagined Nova running through the dunes beside him, as she had always done, full of energy and trust. "We honor you," he said softly, "and through you, we honor all life." The galaxy had begun to learn, slowly but surely, that strength was not only measured in power, weapons, or numbers. Strength could be measured in patience, vigilance, and the courage to stand for what is right, even when no one is watching. And in that quiet understanding, humanity had shown its greatest power, the ability to change the galaxy not by force but by care. The stars above twinkled in quiet agreement, their light stretching across space and time. Somewhere beyond the reach of human eyes, aliens paused in their tasks, reflecting on lessons learned, on values reconsidered, on the meaning of life itself. Back on the red sand world, Elias knelt one last time at Nova's marker, brushing the remaining grains of sand into place. "We will not forget," he said. "We will protect, we will remember." The wind moved gently over the dunes, carrying his words outward across space, across systems, across species. The galaxy had begun to change. And for the first time in centuries, it was moving toward understanding, not fear, toward respect, not domination, toward a future shaped by principle and the quiet courage of one human and the dog who had taught him everything. Elias stood, letting the wind touch his face, the stars above lighting the horizon, the memory of Nova alive in every grain of sand. The galaxy was watching, and now humanity was ready to guide it.